Society Radio, your home for modern animism. I'm your host for today's show, Laura Giles. Let's open by calling in the element of earth and ask that you bring in stability so that we may move forward from a place of groundedness. I call in the element of air and ask that we borrow your inspiration to make this podcast entertaining and useful. I call in the element of fire and ask that you unite our passions so that we may hear the voice of truth within us and do something with it. I call in the element of water to give us flexibility in thinking and feeling. I also ask that our loving, helping ancestors be with us today to help us guide us in the direction that we most need to go to open our hearts and reach out in a way that benefits us all. I'd also like to begin by expressing gratitude to the elements, our helping ancestors, and all our non-human relations for helping us in ways that are both seen and unseen. I'd like to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in and supporting us with your donations. As a listener-supported station, we could not continue bringing you content without your support, so please keep that coming in. If you haven't donated yet and want to, you can do that on our website at www.pansociety.net. I'd also like to thank our guest today, Javier Regueiro, author of San Pedro, Opening the Pathways of the Heart, and Ayahuasca, Soul Medicine of the Amazon Jungle, a comprehensive and practical guide, who is here to talk to us today about sacred plant medicine. Welcome, Javier.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Now, Javier, you're from Spain, right? And were brought up as a Christian. How does a Christian guy from Spain end up doing plant medicine rituals in Peru?
It's even more complicated in that I was born and raised in Switzerland from Spanish parents. Have lived all over the world and have been living here in Peru for the last 13 years. My decision to move here was in order to do my work with plant medicines. Why? Because I believe that we all wish to support each other in the best way possible. And my own experience with plant medicine has been so healing and liberating that soon enough I had a desire to share this process with others. Plant medicines are plants, so they need humans in order to handle them and to share their message. So I just volunteer to be of service to them and to the people who feel called to this process.
So now when you say plants, all plants obviously have healing powers. I mean, spinach has lots of vitamins and teas have medicinal properties. So you're talking about something different though. So what makes a teacher plant a teacher plant?
So first of all, my training has been in Amazonian plant medicine. And in Amazonian plant medicine and culture, everything has and is an expression of consciousness. They are not seen, plants are not seen as molecular compounds.
Right.
They are seen as energies. And plant teachers are simply the most easily audible plants in the plant kingdom. All plants have something to offer us if we take the time to listen to them. Plant teachers, what are known as plant teachers, are simply the most audible.
So how are the energies of these plant teachers different? Like, say, tobacco is different from peyote or ayahuasca or mushrooms, or...
A teacher teacher is someone who is willing and able to reflect back to us our own selves, both our own shadow as well as our own light. Different teachers have different teachings for different people at different times along their journey. So it is for us as individuals to go to them and find out what they have to teach us.
Okay.
At this particular point in time. At the same time, each plant does have a unique energy and a unique field of action, so to speak, a different set of lessons. In that sense, it's important, I believe, and everything I say is just my opinion and point of view. It's important for us, if we wish to receive the most from these teachers, to actually go to them with an open mind, with a great deal of humility, so that instead of coming to them with an agenda, with expectations, we can actually receive what they have to offer us, rather than pushing the agenda of what it is that I want.
So how did you decide to work with, so you work primarily with San Pedro and ayahuasca, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And how did you decide that those were the teachers that worked best for you?
Interesting question. So, in my own experience, I found that at least these two plant teachers, and I believe to a certain degree that is a universal invitation from all of creation to us at this point in history. Their main message, their main invitation for us is let go. Let go of what may have been important, even necessary for our survival, for our well-being, but no longer really is. It's an invitation of letting go of what no longer serves us in the present moment, so that we can walk on this planet with a lighter step and with a clearer mind and a more open heart. For me, the lessons of, say for instance, the lesson of ayahuasca translates as the vine of death, as well as the vine of the ancestors. I had, for lifetimes, I finally found out, struggled with letting go of what no longer was. I found myself struggling and resisting change, endings, grieving. I came into this life unable and unwilling to grieve and to let go. So ayahuasca has been a very, and continues to be a very precious teacher in letting go of what no longer is, so that I can embrace the present moment as is. In the case of San Pedro, for me, San Pedro is primarily a very important heart opener. And San Pedro has taught me to open my heart first and foremost to myself. The greatest gift of San Pedro to me personally has been the gift of self-acceptance. Self-acceptance has led to greater acceptance of others.
Mm-hmm.
Self-acceptance has opened the doorway to self-love, which I was to discover was essential for me to actually extend my love to others. So these have been the most important lessons for me. The lessons, not necessarily that I was seeking,
mm-hmm.
but the lessons that I was in greatest need of.
Now, you talk about San Pedro as being a heart opener. So I've done ceremony, and that certainly was true for me. Do you think that the energy of the group or the facilitator has anything to do with what you receive?
I think we have everything to do with what we receive. So, it is important to be aware that the outside world, at least in my belief and experience, is simply a reflection of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
In plant medicine circles, as well as in spiritual circles, as well as in daily life, we easily blame others for our own experience. Whenever things don't go the way we would like, it's easy for us to find something or someone to blame. For me, it's important to understand that the experience of healing and spiritual growth is not necessarily a pleasant one.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily going to go the way we wish. Oftentimes, as part of that journey, we are to face aspects of ourselves that we'd rather not look at. These aspects of ourselves we'd rather not look at, we project into the outside world. And therefore, we may find ourselves in a plant medicine ceremony in the presence of people, including the ceremony leader, onto which we project our own shadow.
So are you saying that the facilitator makes no difference?
The facilitator makes all the difference, but we choose the facilitator.
Okay.
We choose our ceremony companions. And then we struggle to embrace the lessons, the reflections that are coming back to us during the experience. Oftentimes, the lessons that we need to learn as part of our journey are not particularly comfortable or pleasant.
I agree with that.
So it's important to be aware when we engage in this process that our surrounding is not an accident, that on some level we have chosen this experience for important reasons. And actually those aspects of our experience that we struggle with the most are actually the most meaningful
So what would you suggest for someone who's doing this for the first time? What would you say they need to look for in a facilitator?
First of all, I would engage in this process only with someone with whom, despite the fact that we may have just met, that there is a sense of trust.
Absolutely.
That there is a sense, a feeling of safety.
Yes.
If there is no feeling of trust and safety, I would move on. Trust is essential so that we can make ourselves vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that we can let go of our usual protections, mm-hmm. so that the medicine can touch us deeply. And safety is important because we ideally want to come out of this experience feeling better than when we went in.
Yes.
Another thing that I feel is very important nowadays is if we get a feeling that the facilitator or the host is very pushing, mm-hmm. and interested primarily in our money. Mm-hmm. I don't think that that's a very good attitude, mm-hmm. because in that monetary interest, they may forget about more important aspects of this work. Mm-hmm. For instance, if someone is invested in making sure that you join their ceremony or retreat, they may not look at, for instance, the fact that maybe you are not ready yet for mm-hmm. this experience, or that maybe this is not a good match to begin with. Mm-hmm. So if we sense that monetary interest is a high priority, I would move on.
So there are some people who should not do this. What would be your disqualifying characteristics?
It's not that some people should not do this, but it is a matter of whether the individual is ready mm-hmm. for experience. Mm-hmm. And ready, what is readiness? For me, for us Westerners at this point in history, the greatest gift of these plants is their ability to put us in touch with our own shadow. Mm-hmm. Because this is what we struggle the most with. We are very expert at running away from ourselves, running away from those aspects of ourselves that we are not proud of, that we have judged negative. So when we engage in this process, we would do well to ask ourselves, am I willing to meet those aspects of myself that I would rather not meet? And if we are willing, then let's go ahead. In terms of people who should not at present moment engage in this process, I would definitely list anybody who is taking antidepressants, anti-anxiety, any kind of medication that affects their brain chemistry as well as their moods. Of course, these people are welcome to let go of these substances. However, it is very important to be aware that letting go of those substances and medications is not as easy as 1, 2, 3. It is a process in and of itself. The process of letting go of our own chemical crutches is in and of itself a process of reopening ourselves to feeling, to experiencing, which is sign, a proof that the person has the psychological maturity to engage in this process. If a person is not willing to let go of these crutches, then in my opinion, they're not ready for this process. Engaging in this process while taking these medications or substances is very dangerous, physically as well as emotionally and mentally, and highly discouraged.
Okay. And what about, I know in some native cultures, menstruating women are not allowed to participate in certain rituals. Is that the same for ayahuasca and San Pedro? And what about pregnant and breastfeeding women?
Okay. It is important to be aware that there are infinite ways of engaging in this process. There is no one truth as to how to go about it. Now, for instance, in my case, I was fortunate enough that my teacher is a lover of women in very beautiful ways. And he is not afraid of women. He is not afraid of the power of women. In many cultures, women are asked to stay in a specific place because while menstruating, they are at the peak of their feminine energy. With time, men have come to fear that energy and that power. And therefore, this traditional setting, a special place for women to have their menstruation, has turned into a place of segregation rather than honoring. So, because of my teacher's positive attitude towards women and feminine energy, he welcomes menstruating women in ceremony, and so do I. However, I always have a talk with the person before the ceremony. It is not an accident that a woman signs up for a ceremony while menstruating. Usually this happens because it's exactly their reproductive and sexual organs and sexuality that are asking for healing.
Okay.
And at the same time, it's very important to be aware for the person leading the ceremony that the woman is menstruating, because usually women are much more sensitive to the medicine, therefore need a lot less. So the important thing is, if we are taking medications, supplements, if we suffer from any physical condition, if we are menstruating, it is most important to share all that information when we sign up for this experience, so that we can give the ceremony leader the chance to evaluate whether they feel comfortable having us participate in that ceremony or retreat.
And is that the same for breastfeeding and pregnant women?
I have no problem with breastfeeding or pregnant women joining my ceremonies or retreats, provided that they take full responsibility for their decision, rather than coming back to me months or years later is blaming me or the medicine for whatever went not according to their expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I see no problem. I've had pregnant women join my ceremonies and retreats with very positive results, as well as breastfeeding women.
Okay.
Yes.
So you and I are both using the words ritual and ceremony, and for people who don't routinely engage in that, that can bring up all kinds of spooky pictures. So what's the ceremony actually like?
So ceremonies vary greatly depending on the person who is leading them, depending on the tradition that they are trained in, or the lack of tradition and lack of training. But I would rather speak about what you mentioned in that same sentence, the fact that people struggle with the word ritual and ceremony. This process is a healing process, and in my opinion, nowadays, the greatest healing that we are longing for is a spiritual healing. Many people, many Westerners in particular, are spiritually orphaned. We have been for several centuries. And many of our diseases as individuals as well as society stem from this alienation from our own spirit. We struggle with finding once again sacredness in our world, in our lives. We also struggle to actually honor spiritual authority. One way of that this manifests is in a tendency to want to do things our own way, rather than according to ancestral ways that have worked perfectly well for thousands of years. Our egos are fully swollen, and they easily start acting as spiritual egos, such as Spirit told me that I don't need to do any of this, or whatever. that I am my own divinity, my own authority, and I can do as I please. This is a trap that all spiritual seekers will fall into sooner or later. And it is an important part of our spiritual journey. But I find that to actually follow the rules, follow the wisdom that has been gathered by people who have engaged with these plants for thousands of years, is most wise.
Yeah, I like structure and tradition too. So what is the significance of the prayers, the songs, elements, directions in the ceremony? And would the process be the same if those things were omitted?
In the Amazonian tradition, ayahuasca ceremonies have only the bare minimum of ritual. Say, for instance, the Native American church, peyote ceremonies, are very much based on ritual, on things to do, and having to do it a certain way. If that has a level 10 of ritual, I would say that Amazonian plant medicine ceremonies are level 2. Basically, the ceremonial ritual part of it is simply about creating and sustaining a container, a safe and strong container where the person can have their experience. It is understood that this is not about the ceremony, it's not about performing a ritual, this is about creating a container where the person can have their experience with the medicine. End of the story.
Okay.
So all aspects of the ceremony, say for instance, most importantly, the singing, the Icaros, are to support and facilitate that individual experience with the medicine.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say about people who just are listening and say, oh, I want to try that. They get some stuff online and do it in their living room by themselves?
I would say that this is a sign of a much bigger predicament. It is a sign of our increased individualism, of a swollen ego that believes that I can have it my way, regardless of a whole history in the use of these medicines. Now, it's really important to also honor everybody's journey, mm-hmm. rather than judge it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I personally would not do that because I am fully aware of the power and therefore of the delicateness of this process. The more I engage with plant medicine, the more humble I become. Mm-hmm. The more thoroughly I follow the rules. However, if this individual chooses to do it any which way, it is not for me to judge.
Yeah.
There must be some reason. There must be some important reason. What I do believe is the importance of taking full responsibility,
yes.
for the consequences,
yes.
of our own choices.
Yes.
And that is the same whether I choose to buy something online and do it in my living room, whether I choose to go to the jungle and work with an ayahuasquero, or choose to drink ayahuasca blindfolded and dancing by a river.
Mm-hmm.
Simply to take responsibility, mm-hmm. and say, this I chose, and not blaming oneself, but taking responsibility.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say?
I feel, excuse me, just for a moment, I feel that this is very important. We are so used to blaming, to deflecting responsibility, that all this blaming is actually keeping us in a place of deep immaturity. Now, it's important to know that traditionally, both ayahuasca and San Pedro were initiatory medicines. They would be offered only to those individuals that were deemed to be ready for them. So there was an element of, okay, you are showing that you are ready, that particularly that you are an adult. This is not child play. So if we find ourselves very easily prone to blaming then we are not ready for this experience.
So maybe my next question speaks to what you're saying now, but when people say that they did one or the other, San Pedro or ayahuasca, and it didn't work, what does that mean to you?
It didn't work is a very superficial assessment. And it is more a reflection of the superficiality of the attitude of the person who had that experience. It speaks of expectations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And expectations have no place in plant medicine as well as in any honest spiritual path.
So how would a person prepare then to get the most out of it? How would a person prepare to get the most out of it?
Well, for instance, in my books, I wrote 2 questionnaires.
Ah, that's useful.
And actually, I'm presently talking about those questions in my own podcast,
okay.
Plant Medicine Transmissions. There are 2 questionnaires. One is a questionnaire to oneself, and the other one is a questionnaire to the ceremony leader or host. So I find those questions, particularly the questions to oneself, to be very important to actually see whether we are ready. We may want it, but are we ready for it? Are we ready to actually offer to the medicine what is asked of us? I feel it's very important to inform oneself. Knowledge nowadays is pretty easily available. Speaking to people who have gone through this process, and then we ask the host or the leader of the ceremonial retreat what is asked of me, what do I need to do in order to prepare. If nothing is asked of us except our money, move on.
I totally agree.
There are preparations.
Yes.
In diet, in everything. I like to keep those preparations to a minimum so as not to overwhelm the participant, but I'm also very strict about it. If we're not following this bare minimum, then you're not in. But it's important to know that these requirements do change from person to person.
Okay.
So it's important to speak to the people who are our hosts, and so that we are all in alignment, so that we're all in agreement. In the view of engaging in this process, it's also very important to think about the afterwards.
Yes.
The experience with plant medicines starts the moment we entertain the possibility of us engaging in it. In that moment, the wheels start turning. Our fears, our doubts, self-sabotaging, everything comes up. And this is a very important part of the process. And the process continues long after the effects of the medicine have subsided. Mm-hmm. So people who are looking just for the experience of being under the effects of the medicines are widely mistaken about the range and the scope of this experience. Mm-hmm. The integration part of it, what comes after, is by far much more challenging than the experience itself under the effects of the ceremony, of the medicine.
So are you talking about the day of the ritual and processing right after that, or are you talking about weeks, months after?
I'm talking about the rest of your life.
Okay. Okay.
That process of integration may last a few days, a few weeks, a few months, years. So it is important to be aware of that. It is important to be aware that this is a radically transformational process that invites us, and if we don't listen to the invitation, forces us to change.
So do you see people who come back over and over again and just don't get it? I mean, they really, really want it, but they're just not getting it?
If people keep struggling with the same themes, is because they are not addressing them, mm-hmm. because they are not really addressing what needs to be addressed. So say, for instance, this is just an example, and there is no judgment about it. Years ago, I had this kid come over here speaking to me. He had spent several weeks in a Santo Daime community in Brazil. And Santo Daime is a church that uses ayahuasca as a sacrament. And it's a very heavily Catholicized kind of church. This kid was feeling very, very overwhelmed by what the medicine was bringing up for him. Mm-hmm. And when he would speak to other community members, the only answer that he kept getting was, you just have to pray harder. Mm. So he kept praying harder, as hard as he could, but that was not what he needed. Yeah. Yeah. So it's important when we engage in this process. These are medicines. A medicine is something that addresses our needs, not our desires, not our wishes, our needs. So when we engage in this process is about asking oneself, over and over, what is it that I need right now as my next step along my journey? When I meet with my clients individually before each ceremony, is always to support them in creating an intention for their ceremony. And that intention is always about, what do I need right now? Not what do I want.
Mm-hmm.
In the case that the person has a very strong wish and there's nothing else on the horizon, then it's about, okay, this is my desire. What do I need to explore in order to make that desire a reality?
Okay. We're running out of time, and I have some questions that I just have to ask. So one of them is, you talked about in your book about how ancestral wounds can be revealed and healed. And I think that's kind of a foreign concept for a lot of Westerners. So can you explain a little bit about what that means?
I was made aware many years ago through family constellations that whatever is not integrated, whatever is not healed along the ancestry line keeps getting passed down the line.
Yes.
Sometimes it jumps here and there, but it keeps going because it seeks healing and integration. And it is not an accident that we choose this or that ancestry line, this or that race, tribe, religious background, because in those families, tribes, whatnot, they carry the themes that are most important for us to heal in this lifetime. So they are a reflection of our own inner landscape. It is important to be aware of that. Many people with a touch of ignorance and spiritual pride, they go like, oh, I incarnated in this family to heal my family and to heal my ancestors. Yes, true. But first, you heal your own self. And you heal those aspects of yourself that the tribal line is reflecting back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of coming as a holy missionary, wanting to heal the whole world without doing your own homework.
Right. And so ayahuasca is, the energy of ayahuasca helps to facilitate that.
When the person is ready for it,
mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And obviously these plants are considered drugs in the United States, Canada, probably some other places too. So what would you say about the safety of that, and how does one stay safe when they're considering using these medicines?
I would insist when engaging with these medicines in countries where they're still presently illegal. I would insist on safety and discretion.
Mm-hmm.
I would insist on making sure that I am being taken care of, rather than I am just a financial contributor.
Mm-hmm. So things could go wrong.
Anything can go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Anything can go wrong, but it is not an accident that things go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So it is our own responsibility to choose an environment that feels safe and supportive, and still be open to any manifestation of our deepest fears, of our worst nightmares, because that is how this healing process unfolds oftentimes.
Yeah.
Something that I am reluctant to take responsibility for, but that it is high time for me to look at, more easily than not, I will just manifest so that I can look at it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to thank you for sharing all that great information, Javier. How can people get in touch with you if they want more information?
They can reach me through my own website, which is javierregueiro.com, or my other website related to my plant medicine work called ayaruna.com, AYARUNA. And I took I made the effort of writing 2 books about these medicines. I invite this audience to read them. Mm-hmm. They are full of information, and also they are not, I don't sell illusions. I don't sell sweet cakes. These books, as far as I'm concerned, are a more objective approach to these medicines, but very informative.
Yeah, I agree. I've read them, and I think it's a really good place for somebody who's considering doing this to start. So the books again are San Pedro, Opening the Pathways of the Heart, and Ayahuasca, Soul Medicine of the Amazon Jungle, a comprehensive and practical guide. And you can get them at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, the usual booksellers. So thank you all for joining us for this edition of Pan Society Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so that you're notified when the next podcast posts. If you'd like to support our station and see us thrive, you can donate at www.pansociety.net. See you next week. Thanks, Javier.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.